So in the previous video we created this library with this payload class here, and this is going to be used both in the mobile client, and the same source code is going to be used in the Azure function, which we're going to create next. Okay, so let's do that first bit. Let's create that Azure function. Now we could go onto the Azure portal and create one there, even put the code in there and test it. But that forces us to use a live connection, and we need to know what we're doing if we don't want to run up costs and so forth. So for the purpose of development, let's create a local instance of an Azure function, which seems to do pretty much the same thing, and it's perfectly suitable for what we're doing here. So we right click the solution, add a new project. The quickest thing really is to clear any filters and just type function. That gets us right in there. Okay, so we click next. I'm going to call it function app. I don't want the one. Create. That adds another project to the solution. HTTP trigger. So various ways to invoke a function. So if you think of a function, forget any servers. Obviously there is one somewhere, but you think of it as sort of like a static method in the cloud. All right, and something has to make it run, and in this case it's going to be an HTTP or HTTPS request. So storage emulator set to none. Authorization function, we could have anonymous, but leave it at function. It won't affect the local instance, but up on the cloud you want to take a key and embed that in your header, so you don't just get any old person coming in and connecting to your functions. You just want your applications to do it. Okay, it's pretty easy to do. We'll cover that later. Right, so we let that set up, and then as usual there'll be some background work going on, so we can have a look at that before we overreact to those little red squiggles. They're only temporary. There they go. All right. See, I did promise. Anything left? That's all done. Okay, and that gives us a bit of template code that we can have a play with now. So let's right-click that and make it the where are you? Hang on a second. Sets a startup. Setups there. What am I doing? Set up a startup project. Okay. Now we can actually run that, and what that will do is it will launch a little server type application in a terminal. Here it is. We should get some nice pretty text in a minute. There we go. And this is running my local Azure function container of sorts, and it should give me a URL at the end and the protocols you can. So this takes get and post. Okay, I'm just going to use get. You could do both. So I'm going to copy that, open a browser window, and paste it in. Now it wants an attribute, a parameter called name. So name equals Xamarin. Hello Xamarin comes back, and you can see the reaction from the server there. Good. Okay. Now that's not what I want. Obviously, I want to add my own code. So I'm just going to do build clean because I had trouble last time. I'm going to paste in my own code now. This is going to return a saying encapsulated in XML. Now it's not going to like it to begin with, because although I've put use hello bindings.lib, it doesn't know about the library. So as we did before, the library's down here, hello bindings lib. If I want to reference that in a different application, right click, add reference, projects solutions, there it is. So now that's referenced in both the mobile client and now the Azure function as well. So let's rebuild all of that. While we're waiting, actually, you can see some of the changes I've made. I've removed any reference to asynchronous code. Anywhere there's something to do with logging, I've taken that away. I didn't want any logging. I have read, I'm not an expert, but I have read that logging implies storage. Storage can imply incurred costs. I'm not sure how we stand with functions and that, but I thought to be sure I don't want to run up any costs when I put this on the cloud. So here we go. I'm using get only, and I've changed the root to lookup saying, because you can use these to create sort of RESTful APIs, for example. Right, good. So it's going to look for a parameter called index, which is the number. So it'll be 0, 1, 2, or 3 of my saying, and that should come back as some XML. So let's now run that one. That's good. We'll have a different URL this time. There we go. As you can see, it's /API/lookup saying. Now, something to point out actually, notice it's HTTP. Now, to change this to use HTTPS, I believe there's a way you can do it. You've got to create a certificate, etc., etc. It's quite a bit of work. Just bear that in mind, because what you'll find later is that the Android emulator doesn't like you to use HTTP. I believe that's a policy change quite recently, and so we have to change the settings in Android to get around that. The real thing on Azure will always be HTTPS. They deal with all the certificates. You don't have to worry about that. One of the benefits of using a hosted solution, I guess. Right, let's put that address in here. Remember, the parameter is index. If I don't put one, it will come back and say query string parameter index must be an integer. So question mark, oh, look at that, index equals 0. So there's our XML. Okay, so you can see the saying, may the force be with you, from 4. 4 being the total number that there are. So 0, 1, 2, and 3. If I go out of bounds, I get that. All right. So what's the advantage of doing this? It would be that, of course, I could change the function in the cloud and add more sayings and just return a bigger number here. And I don't have to update my app to see that change. Good. All right. So that is it for local testing. There's one more thing we would need to do if we're going to use the Android emulator. I'm going to cover that in a separate video, and that's the security settings to use HTTPS on the local host only.